Welcome to this afternoon, to this first artist discussion at the exhibition Moments. And I'm glad that I'm able to introduce a very, not only very famous, but also a very nice artist. You will see it during our conversation. I want to start not with a real biography. I only want to give you some information and we will develop biography, her position in the arts concerning her work during a sort of 1 hour conversation. Simone Forti, one of the founding members of Church, famous movement from the 60s, start of postmodern dance, very important. One, how to say, we have two positions in dance after the Second World War. One is postmodern dance. She is one of the pioneers, one of the founding members. And we have in Germany and Europe, Tanztheater, and Simone was really was first, had her education first at the West Coast in California at a very famous workshop or teacher, Anna Helprin. She made summer workshops there, was participated in Anna Helprin's San Francisco dancers workshop, and then went with her husband, Robert Morris, to New York, where she was very much influenced by John Cage. And here I would give the word first to her, that she a little bit tells us how it was that time, your move from the West Coast to New York, and how it develops in terms of your artistic career.
Thank you, Sigrid. When I went to New York, I was coming from studying for 4 years with Anna Helprin. So I feel I must talk a little bit about working with her. I met her just at the moment that she was, that she had decided to focus on improvisation. And it was a very exciting time to meet a teacher because she was starting on a new period in her work and was very excited about it. And how she was, what improvisation meant for her, how she was going to work with it, how she was going to teach it. And she also was thinking in terms of technically how she would teach us to know our instrument. And she had been coming from her teacher, one of her teachers, Margaret Dobler, at the University of Wisconsin, and working with something that she called experiential anatomy, or the experience of your anatomy. And so with Margaret Dobler, they would look, for instance, at anatomy books and get a sense of the structure and how the muscles were and how movement happened. But then they would spend time moving and exploring perhaps the hip socket. And so even as I start to maybe work with my hip socket, in working with it, I find that my whole body is getting involved. And I didn't know I was going to move like this, but I am improvising. And pretty soon I get interested, and I notice that the balance changes as I move my hip socket. And so my head is responding, and hand is responding, and I have a gesture here. And so from working with anatomy, we were moving towards improvisation as Anna brought this way of working to us. We were also doing many kinds of let's say, experiments of how to find movement in the body. We would look around and for instance, I see the flat wall and somehow without even thinking, I'm influenced to a kind of smoothness where the iron, even as I tried to explain it, the iron bars, there's that rhythm that I can play with, and finding many qualities of movement, abstracting from what we see. So working with improvisation and with, you know how when you're listening to music, sometimes you just get involved in listening, in moving. Sometimes we would just get involved in moving, and the whole consciousness would be in the movement, and it's arriving at a frame of mind or a state of being where one thing leads to another, where, like a jazz musician, hearing a certain cluster of notes, the idea comes for what to do next, and the idea comes for what to do next. And it's a kind of a state of being inspired when the work is really coming. And so we were working with improvisation with Anna.
And with scoring too. Anna Halprin was the first in dance who used scores. Was it that time too you get in touch with scores by her?
Well, she has a long career. I was there from 1955 to 1959. We weren't working with scores at that time. Yeah, yeah. So when I came to New York, it was with that experience of improvisation. It took me a little while, maybe 6 months, a year, to find what I wanted to do now in New York. Excuse me. And at a certain point, yeah, maybe. At a certain point, I tried to go to the Merce Cunningham School. I couldn't do the work. It wasn't for me. But I was lucky that at that moment, there was Robert Dunn, who was playing piano for the classes. His wife, Judith Dunn, was in the company. And John Cage was the artistic director in music. And Robert Dunn was also very much studying with John Cage, taking that moment of being in the presence of John Cage to very much study his philosophy, his writings, his music. And Robert Dunn decided to offer a class to dancers, introducing them to the scores of John Cage.
It was the idea of John Cage to do this workshop with Dunn, was it?
Oh.
I heard, yes.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
The initiative was Cage, really.
All right, all right. Well, we started, Dunn started introducing us to the scores, which which were different ways of working with chance, like Fontana Mix dropping a sheet of paper, or I think with a certain grid onto a sheet of paper that had points. Anyway, a way of chance. You drop one sheet of paper on the other and you see how it landed, and that tells you, okay, at 3 seconds you make a sound, and then at 5 seconds you make a different sound, because it just fell like that. So we would at first try it with movement. We would count seconds and move the head, and then count and move the arm, and that didn't interest me very much. Some people did some nice pieces. But then the class became more that we could just, it really opened up ideas of what we could do. One assignment he gave us was to make a 3-minute dance. Next week we should bring in a 3-minute dance, each of us, but we couldn't work on it for more than 3 minutes during the week. So it was going to be an idea of something. And somehow out of that class, for instance, a piece I made, I think very influenced by that class, it is a score where there are about 8 people, 7 to 9 people standing very close together in a mass and taking turns climbing over the top and down again, and then joining the mass. So
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I came to New York from San Francisco. In San Francisco, we were working outside. We were working very joyously with movement. We were among the trees. We were trusting our body and learning our instrument from moving a lot and watching each other, and then going to New York, being constantly in the buildings, surrounded by buildings. I was missing seeing a lot of things that people had not made. I found myself surrounded by forms that were domesticated, that were invented and made by people. And I felt that gravity was a part of nature that I was still in touch with. I had seen photographs of the Gutai group in Japan. And for instance, a piece by Saburo Murakami, frames about that big into the ground, covered with paper, and he put one in front of the other and walked through the whole group of frames, walking right through the paper. And there was the sense that you could do something that was one action and very simple, and that it would be a very full and wonderful thing. I'd seen the photographs of Muybridge, who was photographing a lot of animals in motion, also people moving. I remember one of a man chopping wood, and you see him with with a hatchet and how he swings the hatchet, and there's a photograph like this and like this and like this and like this and like this, and then picking it up, and he is naked, and it's so beautiful to just see a human body doing something, and through Bob Dunn's class, Robert Dunn's class, I'd heard that John Cage had said that part of what brought him to working with chants was that it was a way to just hear a sound without having the double image of expectations of where musically it would go next. Even he had studied 12-tone music, but even with 12-tone music, you know, if you hear the note here, it could go here, it could go here, it could go here, and then you wait to see where it goes. But there's that background of pattern of where you expect the note to go. That made it hard for him to hear the sound of the sound. So he had found a way to hear a sound by using chants. And I felt if there's a way that I have to feel nature, that I have to feel my weight, that I have to just see a body the way it is before it's trying to be beautiful or trying to be interesting, that I can create a situation that does that for me. And so somehow finding this idea, which it only took 3 minutes to come up with that idea, of getting a group of people and having them take turns climbing over the top and down the other side and remaining part of the form. And then another one climbs over the top and down the other side and remains part of the form. And it can stand by itself, so the public could walk around it or even walk by it and see it like a sculpture. So it had a position in space, it had a mass. So coming to New York, that's what started to happen for me, that permission from John Cage through Robert Dunn to do what I felt I needed to do. Now, this piece, Face Tunes, is an example of a way I found of doing something that I needed. And then I come to Face Tunes. Yes. Essentially, what was happening in my life at that moment it was a separation, a dissolving of a marriage. And I was hurting. It hurts. And I was interested in how, when you fall in love, you imprint somebody's face, that face, when you see that person come in the room, especially as you're in the period of time of the process of falling in love, they almost have an aura around them, and that face is the face. And I was interested in faces. And I thought about taking profiles and translating the profile into sound. I was also thinking that a profile is such a familiar basic pattern that there are all these variations of, that perhaps when you would hear, if we really listen, we'll hear that. That's the sound of a profile. And I thought that we're so familiar with this pattern that maybe when hearing it, you'd have a subliminal sense of a face, and that face would almost have a ghost presence, that you would recall the presence of somebody by playing the tune of their particular profile. So that was the idea I was working with, and at first I asked someone who was working with computers back then, and he said, you don't just feed a profile into a computer and come out with a tune. You have to have a program, and it's very complicated to do it. So I went to some stores where I could find a little motor, and I went to a store where I could find some rollers for printers, and I got hammer and nails and made that machine that's sitting on the table or on the platform that very slowly rolls these profiles that I had drawn. It slowly rolls past. And I can trace the profile with this slide whistle. There's also a single tone that on the score is a line, and it's a tone that I recorded that just, it's sort of a medium. It's not very high, it's not very low, but it stays constant. And so that's the zero tone. And so there's this relationship between this point of reference and this variation of the basic pattern of faces. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
You told us in a very nice way how the situation was that time. Church and church, if you think on church and church, you think on a lot of colleagues, on wonderful people. And tell us a little bit how you worked that time, and how you developed pieces and how you discussed pieces together in the group.
Okay. I think an important thing is that we were dancers, poets, musicians, painters, sculptors, a group of friends who followed each other's work. And so we would go and see each other's dances, go to hear each other read our poetry. There was more a sense of that we were of an era, that we were asking what it is to make things, what was the source of inspiration generally between all these different mediums. We were not as much interested in a vertical way. For instance, as a dancer, I was not so interested in what dancers before me had done. I was more interested in what painters were doing now, but also in what artists before me had done. I think that Dada was very important to us as a permission to invent ideas and to try things, and to break expectations. And also, I remember very often sitting in bars with a mug of beer and with different artists around the table and talking about what we were working on and what we had seen the day before. So there was a lot of talking together and at parties, and there was a lot of dancing together at parties because a lot of people's studios were in empty industrial spaces, so we had a lot of space, and we'd play music and drink pretty hard liquor and dance and talk about what was on our minds. There wasn't much talk about who had been invited to do what or who had what job. There were no grants, but life was easy. You could easily find part-time work and live from working 3 days a week. The city was very safe, so you could get a very cheap apartment and get together with 2 or 3 people and also rent a space to have studio together. So we were free from categories, because now you have to figure out, well, am I going to apply to dance? Am I going to apply to theater? Am I going to apply for a poetry grant? There were no grants. So we didn't have to even say what we were or what we did. We just did it.
Could you a little bit tell us the position of face tunes in your oeuvre, Simone?
Well,
what position does it have? It is a special piece. How would you situate it in your artistic work?
Okay, well, I do occasionally make a piece that's basically sound. Yeah. Like one of the pieces that I did in that first concert at Yoko Ono's loft, which I haven't been doing, although once in a while I have done it, is I have a pan full of nails, and I am shaking that pan full of nails and singing an Italian folk song as loud as I can, and shaking the pan, and that's what's the word? Doesn't matter, the name of it. What is it when a government erases something that you're trying to say?
Censorship.
Censorship, yeah, that's called censor. Another piece, a music piece that's more related to this, which I think of as a love duet. There are 2 platforms, you can imagine this, for instance, that continues and has sides but an open bottom, and that it's long enough for a person to be under it. And a man and a woman, it could be 2 men, it could be 2 women, but I've always done it with a man and a woman. They come in, and he lifts up her box, let's say her platform, and she lies down. He sets it down. He goes to his, lifts it up, gets under it, sets it down, and then they whistle. And on the out-breath, and on the out-breath, they whistle a tone, whatever tone they want. And sometimes there are silences, sometimes the tones overlap. Sometimes it almost seems like answering back and forth. He has some, it used to be a watch, now it tends to be a phone. So he knows when it's been 10 minutes. He comes out from his box, lifts hers, and she comes out, and they walk away. And I felt it sort of like, almost like when you're sleeping together in a bed with a lover, and you're dreaming, you're in different worlds, but you're both breathing in a way you can hear each other breathe. And so that's a music piece with that whistling. Another piece is called Cloths. That actually most of my sound pieces come from man-woman kind of experiences. Cloths came from a dream where my husband told me he never wanted to see me again. So I didn't leave, but I hid behind the curtain, I hid behind the couch, I hid in the closet, and I lived my life like in the dream, hiding. And so then I made this piece of 3 frames that are about 1.5 meters by 1 meter. And 3 people come in with these frames, like 1, 2, 3. And on the frame, and on the frames, there are attached many pieces of cloth. And in fact, I got the cloth from Tricia because she had so much cloth. And so she gave me these pieces of cloth. I told her about the piece, and she says, well, take. So each of the frames has many pieces of cloth, and to start with, they're all thrown over the back, and there's black on each of them. You just see 3 black rectangles. The people are down behind them. They're hiding behind the frames. Meanwhile, there's an audio recording of some of my friends singing. I asked several friends to each sing 2 or 3 songs. So there are lullabies, there are union songs, there are love songs, there are pop songs, there are folk songs. And I just selected a few. So on this audio recording, there are a few songs with silences between, of different lengths of silence. And the people behind the frames, whenever they feel like it, they throw one of the cloths over. It's attached, so it kind of goes like this, and then it flutters down, and it settles maybe quite neatly, or kind of to one side or to the other, or maybe a little bit like this. And the cloths are different. There's a brown one, a red plaid, there's a yellow with flowers, there's a green solid. And so every once in a while you say, oh, now there's green over there. Oh, look, now there's the dark blue. And also the people hiding behind have to each sing a song, or maybe 2 songs, sometime within the piece. So you have some silences, you have some songs overlapping, you have some live songs, you have some recorded songs, and you have these cloths that are going. You don't have people. You hear voices of people, but you don't see people. So that's another music piece.
So maybe, because your memory is so vivid from all these pieces, maybe you can tell us more how you documented your works and how this comes to your point now when you look back on these early works.
Um, Peter Moore, the photographer, was photographing a lot of the work in Judson Church, and I have a lot of photographs of work that begin at a certain point. I don't have any photographs of the concert at Yoko's loft, but I do have photographs of 2 pieces I did in a concert a few months earlier. Those are the earliest photographs. In a concert that I shared, or an evening of performance that I shared with Klaus Oldenburg and Jim Dine.
She's doing wonderful sketches of her pieces. How does it work together, your drawings and your pieces?
Well, for many years, I worked with movement from watching animals. And so I have many sketches, animals in captivity in the zoo. I have many sketches of animals, and I was translating their movement into my structure. For instance, I was interested that a bear, what comes natural to a bear to change direction is to take the weight of head and shoulders and go like that, and then be going, yeah, we change direction. Well, in many ways we change direction, and often a bear will change direction like that. Well, I can do that too. Or I can go forward like a kangaroo or a rabbit. And so I was interested. And also then I was interested in animals in captivity, using movement to have something to do, to somehow make their life a little bit of richness in their life by bringing in movement games. I saw a little young chimpanzee put a finger in a little hole in the ground and lean away and then run around and around, leaning out from this little perch. And some much more sophisticated movement practices that were not compulsive, also some desperate compulsive movement practices, but some quite sophisticated practices. And so making sketches. And, but the drawings are more to help me make the piece. I have not so much thought about documentation. That's more something that's being asked of me now, and that's a responsibility now.
And also in former time, you did you did an artist book, which is exceptional. In dance, you do not have a lot of people really publishing her experiences at that time. As an artist book for a choreographer is an exception.
Yeah.
How did you develop it?
Well, there I have to
Simone.
thank Casper Koenig, who also invited Yvonne, who did a book with him. He was doing books with various artists who somehow were doing minimalist work or conceptual work. Dan Graham, he did a book with. Snow, the filmmaker Snow, what his first name? Michael Snow. He did a book with Michael Snow, and he invited me mainly because of that group of pieces that I did, that the huddle is one of which the huddle is one, the dance constructions. Since I had done the dance constructions, which are what he wanted from me, I had had a lot of other experiences. Basically, I'd gone to the Woodstock Festival and gotten stoned out of my mind, and been a very heavy-duty hippie for about a year, and I showed up to the press of the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design with all my beads and wanting to write about vibrational consciousness. And that was not what Casper had in mind. So we fought it out for 2 years, and this little book came out, which I think is quite a beautiful little book, and I think a much better book than either of us had in mind. And I feel that I'm making fun now of my frame of mind that I was in, but I feel that that was a real frame of mind, and that the book finds a bridge, or I was afraid for a time that if I tried to bring a rational framework to the experiences I had had, with LSD, that a demon would make me pay for it. So I was even quite afraid, and but I did it, and I think it's there in the book somewhat.
And you did it to document, or was the reason to make a sort of first documentation of a period of your life, or and
yeah, I think I did it because I thought that that's what I had been asked to do, and I got interested in the writing. I got interested. One thing I discovered is that I can describe movement quite well. And the puzzle of how to describe a movement, I found very interesting.
And you spoke about that a lot of people ask you now to document. Is it different now, or explain a little bit what you are doing in terms of documentation at the moment, Simone?
Well, it turns out I have a lot of drawings I hadn't realized. And so we're taking pictures of all the drawings and writing a name for them, or writing a name for a group of drawings, counting them, putting the information in a computer program. We're going to go, and I kept a lot of announcements for different performances. We're doing that with them. Notebooks, I have many notebooks. We're taking pictures of the cover of the notebook, and then taking pictures of one or two inside pages, putting a tape with a number on them and a date. And what I'm finding interesting is that I'm handling the notebooks, and I open and I start reading, and I think, oh, that's a great idea, I could work on that. So I'm finding it a source, a fresh source for things that I might want to go back and work on. Documentation in itself, it's not for me. I do it out of a sense of responsibility, because like I joked that I'm Simone Forti's secretary. and I recognize that she has done things that are part of what we have, and we should preserve it, and I'm the most likely one, as long as I'm around, to be helpful to do that.
As a sort of obligation for the future, or
Yeah. I've gotten a little lazy about teaching. I'm teaching a lot less, but I think that what comes more naturally to me is this sense of the work continuing through transmission of a way of working, of a way of exploring, and then it goes from generation to generation. Are you familiar with Phuket? Little bit. Well, she's been working on a film now for, I don't know, 10 years, called 4 Women in a Tree. And she has a lot of footage from Anna, then from me, because I studied with Anna, from herself, because she studied with me, and from someone who studied with her. And it's a family tree. And she has wonderful footage, too much footage. And, but I really believe in that I believe that I'm good at that kind of transmission, and that I understand that better, and I'm more interested in that than I am in archiving. And often people will say, well, when did you do that? And I'll ask Jason, when did I do that?
Jason?
Jason's my assistant, and he knows. But if neither of us know, then I'll invent a date and say, okay, yeah, they want a date, have a date, and it's as good as another, and then it starts to be codified, and it's fine, it works.
And
so then the situation here is actually in your way of thinking, that you can be here also and give your way of playing face tunes or your ideas further to another generation, and not just sending a work somewhere where it's shown?
If I really, ideally, I would be doing at least a 3-day workshop, working and barefoot, getting people moving, at least 4 hours a day for 3 days.
shall we arrange it? Simone?
Well, like I said, I'm getting a little lazy about teaching, but yeah, I should do it. I should do it.
And so let's question further on. What do you, as I say, will be a sort of appropriation lab. Boris Schamatz will come with his group. What do you expect if others take your material over, take your experience over? Do you have a sort of expectation?
Well, I feel that there are two parts. There's the original, which I think is important to have a sense of it. Like, for instance, for me to become aware when I was in my 20s of John Cage's scores was one thing. To find out more about what he was thinking, why he did it, how he was thinking, was important to then getting some real nourishment from the score, because otherwise I could take a surface thing, but I haven't gotten the nourishment. So to understand the original thing. And then what a response might be could be anything. It could be something that I might not recognize. How did they come to that response? If they did, they did. And I accept it, whatever. What I'm doing with my class at UCLA, at the University of California at Los Angeles, it's with people who have worked some with movement. I have them bring whatever they're interested in reading. Can be political, it can be theoretical, it can be a novel, it can be how to lose weight, it can be whatever they're interested in reading. And we might sit and read for a half hour, and then they might talk about what they've been reading about and what they're interested in. And then I'll have them talk. I'll have them move around without worrying about how they're moving, without really worrying about what they're doing, but just keep moving. I might even say keep changing levels, because that way they keep moving. So you get all the way down to the floor and then sit and then change space and let your thoughts go. Don't worry about what you're thinking. And I'm now thinking, I've just been reading The God of Small Things. Or is that the God of Small, the something of small, this something of small things? And remembering how she weaves I'm now going to associate this blue bottle with this afternoon. But that's, I wouldn't bring them to that right away. But okay, let me give you a better answer. One thing we'll do is now you stay just like that. Don't move, even your gaze. Okay, and I'm going to find a relationship to that. I think I'll do this. I'll do like you, but I'll put it here. Okay, now you have to change the landscape.
Like to observe you in more details.
You would like to what?
To see you closer, with a closer.
Okay, good. Okay, I feel different now. Good. This is different. Well, I think then I might get closer yet. I might. Okay, we have a new landscape. So we would do that. We would do that. And then we would run. Okay.
I think now we should get up and look at the installation, and perhaps Simone is giving some comment on it, if possible.
Okay. Okay. To find profiles to work with, you might want to also come look at the those photographs and drawings. And those are faces from a physiognomy book. There's some faces from an anthropology book. So I ended up working with some profiles of faces that I found in books. And I made a score. This is a copy of the original. I made a score where I placed the faces on a scroll, and also there's the zero tone, this line, and a little motor that that makes the scroll go by. And somehow, to me, it's important that there's the zero tone, that the noses are to this side, the forehead start to that side of the zero tone, the throat is always to this side of the zero tone, because each face is placed with the bridge of the nose on the zero tone. This has gotten a little old and stiff. It'll play, but it's hard to do very small moves with it like this. So I've been working it like that. Okay, we start with the zero. Principle that I have with this and many other things is you do the best you can. So and then what you get is what you get. So, I find that a very beautiful sound piece just by itself. Okay.